Hey folks, this is Tully and welcome to some more Game Dev. Coming to you on a Tuesday. That's odd, we've only been doing Sundays recently, and that's because I have another 4 weeks off. I've taken 4 days or 4 weeks off of work to focus on infinite retries to defeat the Demon Lord, similar to what we did last year. If you've been around before, or if you followed my journey last year, you know that I took 4 weeks off last December in order to try and work on trying to have a demo by January 5th. We did not make that deadline last year. Ended up getting distracted with a couple of things, but mostly map editor stuff, which ended up being super valuable, but did take up a good chunk of the last week or so of last year's kind of vacation game dev. I should probably come up with a name of this now that I'm doing it twice. But this year we're back and we're going to be streaming again 4 to 5 days a week, I think. We'll see how it turns out. But the main goal this time is trying to get yet another demo. Last year we failed to get that demo by the end of December, but I did end up getting something around mid-spring that I did show to like friends and family. Got a lot of feedback, kind of threw me for a loop, and I had to kind of go back to the drawing board on a couple of things. And then the last few months we've been doing Game Dev Sunday streams, and those have been super helpful for kind of helping me work through the rut I was in and find solutions to a lot of my problems. So I think for this run of 4 weeks, I think my primary goal is going to be getting chapter 1 done. In fact, I think I want to just, maybe update this to be complete chapter 1, because I think that's a fairly reasonable goal. We'll have to expand this box a little bit. Now, in order to do that, there are some major tasks that we're still missing. We are in need of a lot more dialogue work. The dialogue we have now is fine, but I would like it to be better. And I would like to do a lot more cutscene work. There's an audio pass. We built an ambient sound effect system recently, which I really like. I'd like to do more with that, as well as combat. Combat is still not 100% there. The main problem we're still running into is the movement problem, which is what we're going to be tackling today. So, what is the movement problem? Well, we have a system in which, as you move around the world, time ticks 1 step every time you move. And if you attack an enemy, each of your actions have a certain amount of time associated with them. So if I perform slash, that'll take 3 ticks basically for it to be performed. And the enemy also has a number of turns or seconds or minutes or whatever you want to think about this time unit as, in which after that amount of units has passed, they will also attack. This is all well and good, and it works mostly if you're standing still and you're just fighting the enemy one attack at a time. But the problem we've been running into for a while is that if we move, you can just get pretty far away from the enemy, and there's not much they can really do. I can have them chase after you, but then you can just move away again. And we've tried a couple of different things to solve this problem. One of the things that we had most recently changed, which I have since reverted, and I do not have an easy way of bringing back up, is we had made it so that you couldn't move during combat. So you could use the directional pad to move your character around, but you couldn't actually do anything to move itself. We tried adding an ability so you could push a button to trigger your character to move, but that felt really awkward and wasn't working either. So we then kind of realized that that's not going to work. It feels bad to take up one of your actions with moving when you're in combat, when before combat you could just move around naturally. The other thing I've tried is also giving move a amount of time it takes once you're in combat. So it takes 1 second to move normally, but then when you're in combat, I can make it so that it costs 2 seconds to move, and it has a little charge meter like most of your abilities. This still runs into a problem with you can mostly just outrun the enemy unless they have some pretty good range attacks or some really fast attacks in response to you moving away from them. Regardless though, it still doesn't quite feel right. So If you've looked at the title of this video, you probably have seen where I'm going, but I think the most obvious solution that is the lowest, like, it is the least reinventing the wheel, is I think we should look at just trying a attack of opportunity system, where you can move freely for one CT, one second, 1 minute, whatever, but if you move away from an enemy, they should get to perform their action immediately. So like if I move here, this enemy should have triggered their attack right away. And I think that'll probably likely solve our issues, because then you could move away from the enemy, but eventually they will chase after you. And when they chase after you, they will get hopefully next to you. I need to maybe work on some chaining so that this ranged attack one doesn't come up immediately after a chase. But regardless, with a little bit of behavior work, I think this will work, so that they'll chase up to you, maybe try and do like a red attack, which is their heavy long CT attack right after a chase, and if you move away, they'll get a big hit on you. I think that seems pretty reasonable. So that'll give you the freedom to run away from an enemy if you want, but every so many CT turns, you're going to potentially get chased down and hit, and you might be able to escape out of the map without having to engage that enemy, but you will be punished with some amount of HP damage. The question now becomes, how do we build that? I'm not entirely sure, to be perfectly honest. I think that there's a pretty straightforward idea here, which is that we need to find a way to let the enemy know that the player has moved while they are charging an attack. And we don't currently have any kind of detection system for that. And I'm trying to think if there's any kind of system we could tack onto, but I don't think so. I think this will be a wholly new concept. Because when I push move, the AI doesn't know what the player is about to do at that moment. So we will need to have some way of communicating to the enemy what's happening. That's going to happen inside of the combined turn combat state. This is basically the one that says, hey, has the player inputted something? Do they have a plan? If so, then increment that plan until it actually executes, and also increment any AI plans and then have them queued up to be performed as well. So in here, we should know what the player's plan is at this stage, and we should be able to tell whether or not that plan involves moving. Interesting. The AI plan does not have any concept of an ability at this stage, though. It is just a list of sorted sequence steps, so it knows like a series of actions it's going to perform. If we do get AI plan from in here, where is this being set? Oh, here? And in the player director, we establish an initial ability, and then the actual ability we're going to perform. So we could add this logic directly into the player director. That's one direction we could go. The other option is we could look at the move ability itself. In fact, I'm going to look at the player first. So if we look at the player container, what move are we using? We're using this contextual move. Yeah, navigation is using contextual move. So then let's take a look at this prefab directly. So this ability is going to perform all of these steps underneath, all these children objects, and the one we mostly care about is this move effect. Here, this is the actual one. This is like kind of a prefabable section, which is mostly finding the next target in front of the player, making sure that it's a valid place to move to, resetting the fog stuff, revisualizing a lot of the fog stuff, applying, and then actually moving the player forward. So this is where the move actually happens. So we could have some sort of system either at this level that is tracking the player's movement and alerting the enemy. It could be in here somewhere inside of the actual walk movement component where we're actually transitioning between the two tiles. Or it could be at the actual fundamental state level where when we plan stuff, we determine that the enemy or the player is about to move and then queue up these actions to happen. Or it might be a combination of all three of these locations. Interesting. I guess the question for me becomes, what does this look like? What is this, the actual, like, visual thing that the player is going to see when the player tries to move when the enemy is about to perform an attack? So this enemy is about to do a green action, which is a light attack, in 4 turns. If I was to push down, I think what I should see is the character halfway move to the next tile. And about midway through exiting that tile, I think we should have the character freeze, the enemy's counter count down to 0, and then the enemy actually strike us. That's going to be tricky for a number of reasons. Okay, so first and foremost, if we want to have the player stop midway through their walk, that will be controlled by this walk movement component, which is going to have us traversing between the two tiles. This mostly only works if we're walking, though. If we're jumping or teleporting between tiles, we may not be able to kind of pause it midway through and have the strike happen. Okay, this is a problem I need to try and address. I'm really bad about trying to solve all the problems at once, which bogs me down and slows us down a lot. It's part of the reason we didn't make the demo timeline last year. And I think for today, I would like to solve the movement problem by end of today, because I don't want to spend a week on this. It'd be nice if we can finish it in this 2-hour stream. So I'm not going to worry about every possible movement type and covering all of those. Right now the player can only walk, so we will make this work with walking, and if we have other types of movement like jumping or teleporting in the future, we will have it work for those and we'll figure out solutions. But for today, I want to have it walk halfway or maybe even a quarter of the way to the tile it's going to, and then have the enemy kind of pause the player's animation and then get attacked. It looks like we lerp between the two positions while also updating the animator with the amount of delta time that we've moved. This is going to be tricky, but I think it should be okay. We'll just need to have a pause somewhere in here that kind of stops tracking the delta time for a little bit. Could that be as simple as a freeze parameter that would be defaulted to false, and perhaps the walk movement I guess maybe for... maybe a bit wordy, but I think that's a little more accurate. If not movement frozen, then update movement. Okay. That would get us the ability to stop the movement without having to kind of rewrite too much code. Now this move ability is going to move us to the next tile, and I'm assuming this is blocking. Yeah, this is not going to move off of this sequence step until the movement traversal is complete. And if we call freeze, yeah, the movement's a little complicated here, but basically it's going to stay inside of this walk enumerator function until it reaches the end. So if we call freeze, it'll stay in this infinite loop forever, and we will never get outside of this move to tile sequence step. So if we're going to control this, it's going to need to be in a branch ability effect that will happen simultaneously. It was contextual move that we were using, I believe. So in here, right before we fire off the move ability, what if we added a branch ability effect, which will have another ability effect that will run concurrently alongside the move and will not block the sequence steps from continuing. And inside of that branch, we can have a delay effect, which there should be a delay here somewhere. Should be one of the most basic ones. We'll do it this way. Delay ability effect. And we will delay for... well, this is a good question. How long is Hero's movement? Hero's movement... somewhere in this giant list of animations. Walk loop. Hero's movement is 280 milliseconds. Which if we convert that to Unity, which is done in seconds, that'll be 0.8 of a second, I believe, unless I'm doing some math wrong and the conversions, but we'll figure that relatively quickly. So if we were to try and quarter that, we could add a delay for 0.7 of a second. And then we would, just to kind of test this, have a freeze movement effect that we're going to have to write the component for. We could delay for, I don't know, half a second at this point. Maybe we delay for like 2 seconds just to really tell whether or not this is going to work. And then we will unfreeze movement effect. Now this isn't going to let the enemy attack at all. This is simply going to be testing, can we have a system set up where we can freeze the movement? And then unfreeze the movement, which is going to be required, but this is kind of just the first step of many. So if we take a look at this move ability effect, I think we could probably copy it because it's going to end up having a lot of the same pieces we're going to need. And we'll have a freeze move ability effect. And I suppose we could have a freeze value to determine whether or not we're freezing or unfreezing and use the same component. I don't think we need to worry about predicting anything here, so we're going to just remove all of this. In terms of the apply and construct sequence step, we are still going to need to grab... I guess we kind of need to know what the actual... Like, so ability effects create sequence steps, basically. And so if we're going to make this freeze ability effect, we kind of need to know what the new sequence step we're going to need is. So we're going to copy this move to tile sequence step, and we're going to rebuild that to be freeze movement sequence step, which is probably not a bad one to have anyways, because we can use the sequence steps for cutscenes occasionally, and I could see this coming in handy in certain situations. Now, this isn't going to need to have access to the board because we're not actually going to moving anywhere, and we're not going to have access to a tile, but we will need access to that unit's movement component. So we won't need this, and we won't need this, and we won't need this. We should simply be able to do... Just going to go up a quick second here and check. If we go up through the logs here into default sequence step, blocking true. We shouldn't need any of this logic. In fact, the base one we copied shouldn't need it either. We have to rebuild our constructors. Looks like we'll only need one variation. It will need... It will need a bool for whether or not we're freezing or unfreezing. So I suppose the question becomes, is there a better name for this? Yeah, this should actually probably be called set freeze movement. We'll rename the value here. It shouldn't need an indentation system. I'm also noticing in the properties. Here we're going to reuse this property, or this variable, to be the freeze, which by default will be true. And then we can use this value to be what we're setting the movement's frozen value to. This does not have a return path, is a problem. If we look for a reference for one that is automatic, yeah, we should just be able to return null. That's what I want to validate. And then that should be most of our setup here. Yes. Now we can use this sequence step inside of the ability effect that we were working on. We'll go back here. We'll make this our new sequence step. We don't need to do anything with stats here. We don't need to pass in the board. We can grab the movement. And we can say that the value we pass in here will be whatever the parameter is on the ability effect. And we don't need to plan the tile. In fact, all we need is the attacker information. I'm going to be a little bit forward thinking. Again, trying not to be too crazy with going overboard with more than we need. But I'm just looking for a good example of attacker-defender logic, because we may want to be able to freeze the enemy's movement in the future. And this should be a relatively easy thing to add. Here's an example. So we can grab the ability effect target enum. We can add that here. I'm going to just pin this so it stays near the front. And then we use this in a case statement. And instead of doing attacker as the value, we can be changing this to target unit, which will be null by default. I should be able to do find reference on this to find other implementations. In fact, there should be a better version that lets us do custom as well. Is there... Sorry, I'm going to just look one more time to see if there is a version of this. This is the setup I want. And then I'm just going to add custom to this as well, which will just need a custom ID. So if we put in a custom ID, instead of getting the value this is just passing it forward. I need a setup where I can see myself actually grabbing the value. Sure, we'll do it this way. So we're going to grab get entity by custom entity ID and get component unit on that entity. Cool. So now I can also use this ability effect to freeze any custom entity if I needed to as well. Should mostly only need the target and the attacker of the ability, but sometimes this can come in handy as well. That should be all we need to test this. So if we come into here, do freeze ability effect, we want to make this a public bool. It is click off, click back. Okay, the parameters filled in. So we're going to make this the attacker will freeze, and then we're going to do the same thing over here. Attacker will unfreeze. So in theory, now every time we move, we should pause a quarter of the way through that movement for 2 seconds before continuing to move. Perfect. Exactly how I drew it up. So now the idea would be that if we are fighting an enemy and we are trying to move away when they're performing an attack, we would see the character move like this, the enemy perform the attack, damage be done, and then the character would continue moving to the tile afterwards. Perfect. Seems like it should do exactly what I want. Now we come to the harder problem. How do we have that trigger when there is an enemy next to us who is ready to perform an action or has an action queued up that they want to use against our player. All right. Inside of the combined turn combat state, how do we know if the enemy is going to perform an action? If it has a plan. And these plans get populated when the AI updates its current state and has a plan of attack. If this plan of attack is null, we skip it, aka they don't have anything they want to do right now, so we're going to ignore them. I think we might want to bypass these systems. Yeah, I think we might not want to... I was thinking originally I would want to try and have some way of having this ability trigger sooner. But maybe I'm on the right path in here. Perhaps the player's move should contact the enemy system and see if there's any queued up abilities. And if there are, make an ability effect that will essentially just perform each enemy's attack, basically bypassing the normal combined turn structure. The only thing we'd really need to be concerned about is making sure if the player is moving to not queue up the enemy's actions, because we know that those actions will likely be performed by the player's move. It does feel odd that the player's move would take control of the enemies, though. Okay. There might be a better way of doing this, but I see a path forward in this direction, and I think there's some real oddities, some real, like, that seems like a dumb idea, but there's also some things that I think are really smart about this. That, like, having it happen inside of here means that we would be able to have full control of the timing of it. That's true, though, if we just got, like, the player as a custom entity as well, though. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that I could do this. Well, I think if we build it here and I decide that this is bad and it should be located and centralized in a more, like, robust location, I can always move it more easily once I have it set up once. So let's just build it, and if it ends up being wrong, we can change it. Or maybe not wrong, but inefficient or confusing or bad code, whatever that might mean in this context. So I want to have a system that says if the player is about to move, do not queue up the enemy's actions. I do not think that will be universal. I think there may be some abilities that we might still want to have be performed even if the player is moving. So this will probably be more elaborate. In fact, I think it might be better if we pass in to the AI director that the player is going to move or is planning to move. That's a good question, actually. Can we tell that the player is planning a move? Because we do have some sort of system. In fact, we can look at the move ability we were just right next to. When we construct this, we set the attacker to plan to move to a specific tile. And the unit will have a planned tile they're going to. Interesting. The information already exists. We don't have to have some special logic. We don't need any special logic. The foe state machine, which is updating the enemies on what they're about to do, should already be able to check the enemy they're trying to target and see if they have a plan to move. Interesting. Because we find the nearest foe and we get that unit and set that as our nearest foe target, which is then used as part of the construction of our plan of attack. There's probably some elaborate AI stuff we could do here, but at its core, at minimum, we should be able to see if the thing the AI is thinking about doing if it's going to target the player that's about to move. Sorry, just doing a little bit of archaeology here, trying to remember how some of this stuff is set up. Yeah, it checks the tiles to see if it can target the unit on that tile, and it rates that as a good firing location. And then this attack option gets picked from this list of attack options, and we get the best option, and we choose that final option as our plan of attack, with the firing location being essentially the tile we're going to hit. problem is, if the enemy is not at a point where their CT is at 0, aka they're about to perform their attack, we don't do any of that AI logic to try and find the best target with this attack. So on the turn when the AI would be about to attack the player, we know we can get access to that player and see whether or not it's planning on moving. But if we want to know whether or not the player that we would attack is about to move, we would have to do all of this logic and throw it away. That feels inefficient. Can we access nearest foe? From within the attack state? I think we can. I think for our purposes that's probably good enough. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll do find nearest foe. That should then have the nearest foe value set to something. There's also the concept of a priority target, which I don't really care about at this time. It does look like we don't have a way of accessing this, though. Sure. That way we can just get the unit out. And once we have this value, we can check to see whether or not it has a plan. Can we not know that it has a plan tile? Oh, it is public. Oh, I was probably doing M underscore. So if plan tile equals null, more accurately, we should do it this way. If plan tile does not equal null, then we're going to return out of here, I think, after we do a little bit of setup. We want our next plan of attack to be a wait, essentially, but then we want to decide a new attack after we finish that wait. And we want to queue up our... What do we want to do here? Like, we want to get this normal attack information, I guess. And we kind of want to queue it up in some way that we can access. Oh, can we use the ability response manager? This is a manager that takes a ability that should be performed, essentially, a series of sequence steps, and activates it at specific moments. So like at end of turn. When are things queued up for movement? When does this happen? Inside of the movement system? When does this get called? After we call walk. Oh, interesting. What if we had another type of response? That was like a mid movement? Because this is really a after movement is what this should have been called, but we didn't have different concepts of it. But if we had a new one here, which was mid movement, we could have an ability response inside of the walk system. Yeah, there's so many different ways that we can handle this, because this is essentially bypassing all of this delay system that we set up. Maybe this is better? What would this look like? This would be... Yeah, this would just work, I think. Because it wouldn't continue this while loop. Sorry, processing. If we just do this... Does this have a concept of the type of responses? No, this just checks if we have any responses. But we do have a has responses of types. There is a parameter version of that. So if we do the same thing here, which honestly this probably should have been checking for specifically movement anyways. But if we check to see if we have any ability response types of mid movement, and check to see if elapsed time is greater than the length of time divided by 4, which would be a quarter essentially. So it's not really a mid movement, but I don't know, it depends on how you define mid in this context. But basically, yeah, if elapsed time is greater than the length of the animations quartered, which if I want to be slightly more efficient, we could have a quarter of animation length. And just set it to this value. That way we don't have to do this division in this if statement every time. So if we're a quarter of the way through and we have any responses, start our coroutine and wait for that coroutine to finish on those mid responses. And this would allow us to get rid of this freeze concept entirely. And then all we'd have to do is have the enemy AI essentially queue up their attacks to be performed midway through. What if we say if our CT count is greater than 0 and foe is not moving, wait. Otherwise, have the attack queue up instantly. And then inside of the AI director, instead of queuing up the actions into a plan, we could instead just queue up an ability response. Add a new response. And this needs to take in what? A list of sequence steps, the response type, and its priority. I don't think we care about priority in this situation, because they can perform in whichever order they want. We may eventually want to prioritize certain attacks above others for reasons, but for the time being, this should be fine. So we just need a list of the actions we want to do. I have a feeling we're going to want more logic in the long term. But it would essentially be this list with an ability response type of mid-movement. And then I have to give something for a priority, so we'll give 0. This is a list of sortable sequence steps, not actually a list of sequence steps. Interesting. We're going to hack a little bit. We're just going to have another list here, which we're going to just keep a track of everything twice, essentially. And I'm going to refactor this later, so for now we're just going to duplicate all of these sequence steps, and we'll just throw away the ones we're not using. And I will find a better way of doing this that is not so terrible. Okay, so then with this list, we would be able to pass that in as the thing we want to do. And we would just need some way to determine whether or not we're going to do this one or this one. So I think this is if the plan of attack dot fire location. We have to use this to determine the unit we're trying to hit, which I think is done in here normally. This is done using the abilities area effect. Okay, fair. So if we do that on the plan of attack, we should get a list of targets out. And with that list of targets, we already have a list of targets. That is used for moving, sure. Ability targets then. We can check whether or not ability target 0 right now, because there should only ever be 1. Well, again, we'll need to refactor this. I'm sure I will find this as a bug in the future and be very mad at myself, but we should be able to check whether or not this has a plan. We need to get the unit, get unit, and then plan tile. Does not equal null. Wrote this if statement backwards, which is funny. All right. Else we do it this way. Okay. So essentially we are going to have a check inside of the attack state where we're going to check whether or not we are at a low enough CT to perform our action, or if the foe is moving, then we'll come into here. Otherwise, if... Okay, I want to double check this logic. If the CT is greater than 0 and the foe is not moving, do this. Otherwise, if this is greater than 0, and the foe is moving, we won't go into here. If the foe is moving... and this is... if the foe is not moving and this is less than value, we'll also won't go into here. Okay, so yeah, this will be fine. Now we can just have it so the AI will essentially perform its attack, but then when we get up to the AI director, when it checks to see what its plan is, which it should have one because we got it to queue up if the enemy was moving, it will then come down here and check the same thing to see if the enemy is moving, which maybe we should make a better function for this that just is like get unit is moving, which does this logic internally. It would be more readable. It's fine for now though. And this would be saying if they don't have a planned target, that's not right. No, that is right. If the planned target is not equal to null, aka they have one, or planned tile, then we will queue up this attack, aka any movement, any turning, and any attacking, as a mid-movement response. Otherwise, we'll set it up as a normal plan and let it be executed by the turn order state machine system, basically. I suppose this gets a little weird in that this doesn't care, this setup we've done doesn't care if the player and the enemy are next to each other. Technically, this will trigger if you move and the enemy is like a tile away from you. I think, which is a little weird. So we might have to have more limiters on here that also check to see whether or not we're next to. Ah, this logic doesn't work in this context. Whatever, I guess ability can be null sometimes is the reason this breaks. Let's try something pretty straightforward, which I don't like, but we're gonna just give this a shot, is target moving, which will be false by default. And we're just gonna put it into the plan of attack. So at the very end here, we can do is target moving is equal to is foe is moving. Okay, cool. We could probably do this immediately here. Because we may eventually want the AI's attack logic to know whether or not the target is moving. So having it set here so that these other functions can know that may come in handy. Cool, let's give this another shot. I don't anticipate this will just work, but we will keep trying. Okay, gonna move. Another issue. Right, we never actually fixed this. So now, instead of doing all of this, we can just do plan of attack, target is moving. Done. Then we don't need any of that extra logic. Okay, I suppose we don't need any of this branch logic anymore, because the way we ended up finding to do this means that that's just not needed. That did not work. Let's see if we can figure out why. Well, that's going to be problem number one. It doesn't have this value set yet. I really anticipated that this would have been planned. Oh. The plan is getting stomped? The faux state machine is activating here at AI director next. Interesting. we perform the actual ability of the movement. This defeats the whole point. Okay. 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 This sucks. Fundamentally, there is a flaw in the setup of this system. So it is performing the contextual move here. And when it performs it inside of this ability sequence step, that's the moment we actually set the plan in motion. But we have already determined what the AI is going to do here in the AI director. So we have not set that plan tile the way I thought we would have. That means that the AI also doesn't know that doesn't make any sense. Because I built a system, or I thought I had built a system, where if the player moves, the AI knows the player is going to move and follows them to the correct location. And the only way that could work is if, when the AI is planning, they check against the player's plan tile instead of their normal movement tile. I have fundamentally misunderstood something about how my system works, or the timing of how my system works. And so everything that I've written for the past hour will not work. All right, we gotta dig. We gotta dig. So let's go digging. How does the current movement system work? Because that's where I have a flaw in my understanding. I believed that the AI know where the player is going to move and plans to move next to them because at this point it already knows the tile it's trying to reach. It has a move location it's trying to get to. So if we look at this move location, see, it is checking the nearest foe's planned tile. How could that not be working? It's used here. It's used here. And now it's used here. Okay. My player is going to try and move. At this stage, the plan tile has not been set. Here we are setting it as part of well, this is setting it to null. Did I miss a step? I think I may have double F5'd. Okay, yeah, here is where we're actually applying it at this moment. And then at this moment, we're setting it back to null because we have finished moving to that location. So if we keep checking, there should be a moment where the enemy chases us. So here, on this turn, the enemy should try and chase to where we're going to be, not where we are. So it's planning its direction. Yeah, it's going to keep placing itself on tiles, which is going to change its plan pretty continuously. Did I break this? Sorry, yeah, the enemy didn't move next to us, it moved one tile away. I think this used to happen in Predict. Hold on one second. I'm going to check my file history, and I'm going to see... I did a massive cleanup of the project recently, and I feel like when I did that massive cleanup, I did notice something weird with this file. What is this? Move? Right there. Movability effect. Yeah. Okay. Unit, attacker. I haven't forgot about you. 1 second. Get component in parent. Unit, attacker, dot plan tile. This chunk of code was removed at some point. And I thought this was a little weird, but I was like, maybe not. Maybe that's not needed. But this has broken our planning system. Okay, I'm glad I did that big, massive cleanup the other day and kind of got all my files in order. So yeah, so I saw that I had made this change and I thought that was weird that I had removed this, but I was like, I don't know why. It's been months, so I'm going to just ignore it. But this, I think, is necessary. Now, the question becomes, why did I remove it in the first place? Why did I think that it was okay to remove that? There must have been some other bug that was creating. And I thought we didn't need to be predicting that planned move, which doesn't make any sense, but okay, so now when we move, that did not work how I thought it was going to, but I also didn't mind it. There's some real weirdness going on, but I don't hate it. Okay. So I don't like that the enemy is moving. That's thing number one. Like, it's kind of cool that, like, they move into us, but I think it would look better if the AI just didn't move. I do want to say I am still concerned that adding this back is going to cause some sort of problem, and I don't know what it was. But I guess I'll find it again in the future, and then hopefully fix it correctly next time. Now, for here, I think an easy way to look at this is to go back into the AI director, and instead of doing the move here, we just don't add any movement to the mid-move targeting. I'm overjoyed that this is just working, though. We're literally just playing an entire attack sequence in between the player moving a certain percentage, and it's just working. Any bugs I'm seeing with this are more to do with the way that I've set it up, more so than anything else. Okay, so like that did break it. So let's take a look at the walk. I'm gonna guess the walk movement effect or walk movement component is updating the player's position. Yes, we are placing the player on the next tile over, which is clearing the planned tile as well immediately. Which means by the time we get to this mid-movement, the player is not on their previous tile anymore, and so cannot be attacked. So we need to do this after. There's no way this doesn't cause a ton of problems. Target.center. I guess we could just try. What if we place the player after we finish moving? Because this isn't setting their position, I don't think. This is just setting what their current tile is. In some regards, I feel like it makes more sense to place them on the next tile after the move is finished anyways. The bad thing about this is that this was placed with direction. And we're going to have to uncomment this code. And I feel like there's a reason we were doing this differently. But okay, let's give this a shot. Let's see what happens. I'm not sure what impact this is going to have. Still broken. Hmm. It thinks the player has moved. Okay. Does it think the player is moving? Yes. These don't matter. We're going to remove this one. We're going to make sure that the AI director is setting the response correctly. Here. Target is moving is still true. It's going to queue up 2 actions, turn towards the player, and then attack the player. What is our target's information here? Can we see that? Plan of attack? Not really. We know the target location, but not the actual... the actual target. Okay, so then we're going to put a breakpoint here. We're going to go back to the unit, and I'm going to put another breakpoint in here just to see when place is being called. We hit the mid-movement responses, which should be setting up some ability sequence steps to play. Yeah, it's got the 2 of them all set up here. It's going to send those out as a series of sequence steps. We're going to fire those off and invoke the sequence. We ended up hitting here, and we found 0 targets so far. That's because we're about to try and populate them. So given the board and a position on the board, we're going to try and get all the tiles within that area. It's going to get all the tiles there. Okay, it's doing a bunch of board logic. So that should have gotten a series of tiles. It found 5, 7. As the tile it's trying to attack. And that has no content on it. Okay, well that makes sense. It didn't find anything. And because it has no targets, it's failing. Yeah, it was on 6, 7, so it was on the wrong location? But it hadn't been placed yet, right? It's just been placed, or it's about to be? Yeah, this is where we want to move to. Its current tile was 5, 7? So somehow the current tile had its content removed early? So I guess the thing we care about more is when does the content get updated? Here. Inside of place. Yeah, so if we check here, it already had its content set to null, but this is the point where it should have happened, inside of this check. So then where are the other spots where this could happen? Because we had a breakpoint here and we didn't hit it. The player's not knocked out. They haven't been hit yet. They still have full health. So it's not the knocked out stats effect that's doing it. Okay, so we're going to move here. The enemy should attack us. It knows that the enemy's planning to move to 6-7, and it knows that the enemy is currently on 5-7, and 5-7 currently has its content set to the player. So then if we look for any time this content gets changed, and I'm just going to make sure that I'm not missing any other spots, it gets set here. It gets set... No, this is all it being used, being referenced, being checked against. This should be the only spot where content is modified. So if we F5 through here, this is the slime placing some stuff. Oh, when the slime is thinking about where it's going to move to, does it clear the tile? It's going to take a second to verify this, but I'm going to guess when it's thinking, yeah, this is the one that contains the player, and it ends up getting rid of it. And we never see this as a problem, because we just don't attack the tile. In fact, this is something we want to do. We want to try and move on to the tile that the player is on anyways. Okay, so what's happening is we have set it up so that the enemy should attack this tile, but the AI tries to think about all the tiles it can move to, and when it detects that when it tries to plan or think about moving from this tile, it clears this tile's content of the player, and we never put that content back. Just places it. Just completely removes its content and doesn't even care. And it puts itself back in the right spot, but it never keeps track of that move tile's original content and resets it. Is that something we could do? We'll have to do it in a couple spots. It looks like there's some logic here that's slightly different but repeated. But could we check whether or not that move tile had content? Which is a game object? Yes. Could we remember this, place the unit on that tile, and then when we get to the bottom down here, do move tile dot set content to the original content value? What is this going to do? It is going to clear any planned content it had. Oh, that's funny. When we replace the player on here, it'll also trigger any queued responses. So any cutscenes, damage tiles, anything like that will get re-triggered. Okay, so then in this case, I think... realistically, I think the AI shouldn't be using this place call. I think that there should be a, like, different set of logic, or maybe even a like, temporary grid that we use, so that we're not messing with the true state of things. But can we bypass it just by doing this for now? It looks like we can. I have no idea what the implications of this is. Anywhere else we're doing this? Inside of the state machine. Move, start. Same idea here. Well, I'll figure out what problems this is going to cause by, I don't know, just trying it, but let's see what happens here. What's funny is when we had the enemy actually moving, it was working because it was executing on its plan, which was to move to that tile and attack the player where they're going to be. But that's just not quite what I want. That's what I want. Cool. That didn't work. So green worked. Green worked once. Oh, that's scary. And then every time after, it didn't. That implies something really weird and messy is happening with the contents. Do we still have all our breakpoints? Yeah, it looks like it. Okay. Let's see what happens. So we hit this. It sees that the enemy is not planning on moving. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I think we might just need to rebuild the AI's thinking logic in order for something like this to work. Yeah, there's just so much overwriting of stuff. So yeah, at this point, it knows that the enemy's moving. It's going to try and queue up its attack. But when it gets its list of targets... Wait, it found the player this time? Yeah, the player got hit. So something about that setup worked. Yeah, when I was debugging through that, it looked like it wouldn't. Okay. How do we fix this? How do we fix it? Step one, let's try and figure out why it works sometimes and why it doesn't others. So they're going to perform a red, and that failed. They're going to perform a green, failed, succeeded. So sometimes this logic works on greens, but only greens it seems. It always works here. Okay, well it's worked every time before, but not on that one. Okay, we get hit. Red. I'm going to try skipping a turn. Nope. Still can't figure out where it's trying to go. I wonder if it's because it's thinking about moving. It might be because it thinks the player is moving. And because the player is moving, it doesn't, like, it's not smart enough to know that it's going to hit it anyways if it just attacks normally. So I suppose I will need to add more logic into the AI's processing. So when it's planning its actions, it probably should know that it's going to get this kind of attack of opportunity, this opportunity attack. It's going to be able to do this, and right now it's not planning for that. It's planning on moving, or actually, the red one has special logic set up. It's like getting stunned, right? So let's take a look at how that works. If we take a look at the slime monster, that has something inside of its smash attack that says is stationary. How does that is stationary actually work? Should move. I see. Okay. I get what's happening. So what's happening is if the player would be in a valid spot where the green one would allow the enemy to move and attack the player, so here, if I was to move, the AI will still plan to move to where the player, well, move to a tile next to the player and then attack the player. Oh, and that's why it's working half the time. So what's happening is if the player moves here, the AI will make up a plan to be like, I'm going to try and move here, or I'm going to try to move here, and then attack the player. And I think it's getting into a situation where it's trying to move, but we're not letting it do the move, and so it can't perform the attack on the location it thinks it can, because it's not where it's supposed to be from its plan of attack, basically, because it's planning on moving. So green sometimes works based off of which tile it thinks it's trying to move to attack us. I don't fully comprehend it, but I think that's what's happening. Red always fails because the red sees the player as having moved and therefore says, I can't move and I'm not close enough to attack the player, so I won't even try. But because the green has this ability to move and attack, it will sometimes get in a situation where it can perform the action. So fundamentally, it does need to know that the foe is moving, and it needs to take that into account when determining whether or not to use the enemy player's planned location or his real location. Here. This logic is breaking down a little bit, and it's not going to work in every situation, but I think what we need to do in order for this to work is, if the AI thinks that the player is moving, which maybe this should be renamed to is going to try and attack. I don't know, like it is attacking moving player or something like that. But if it's going to attack the moving player, then use the current tile instead of the planned tile. This is the only spot we're doing this. That can't be right. There must be other locations where this is using the plan tile. Yeah, this is going to need to know the plan of attack. No, this still doesn't make sense. Here, here, and here. There must be something else in the AI's logic that's checking against this planned tile. Because the move part, sure, this probably makes sense, but at this point it should have already planned its action. So in here, when it's planning where to attack, it must know that the unit is moved. Yeah, this whole system needs to get rewritten, and I need I need a better comprehension of it. I'm gonna have to go through it all and try and rethink how this is gonna work with the situation in which the player can kind of be either moving and getting an attack of opportunity on them, or the player can be moving and we want to move after them. And this system's going to need to be able to handle both those situations more gracefully. Oh, is that how this works? Right, because the enemy doesn't target units, it targets tiles. And so it's not actually using the units, it only uses the unit's planned target or planned content planned location or its real location when it's trying to move towards a specific unit. Otherwise, if it's trying to attack specific tiles, it's checking that tile's planned content. And if the content plans to leave, aka the enemy's moving, it's not going to use that. Yeah, I have to, like, yeah, so this is the spot I need to rewrite. This section here is if tile is occupied, or if we're getting an attack of opportunity, then we should use this. I can do this logic, but this essentially destroys this whole setup. Like, you'll never get into planned content ever. And that feels like cutting off the system too much. I guess it's just that one spot then. No, I missed a YouTube comment. If you're still around, Nifty Gaming? That's not it, but I'll go with that. I also miss Snow Worlds from time to time. Nowadays, the content is definitely very different than it used to be, but I still appreciate folks stopping in and saying hello. Alright. Does this fix it? Do a red attack. It does. Okay. Ooh, it super breaks if I try and move back, though. Yeah, because it knows the target is moving. But in this context, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, this logic needs to be far more complicated. I'm gonna have to give it more thought. Oh, we are at time though. I think this is fair. Okay. So, we are going to call it for now. We'll be back in 2 hours. We're going to keep working on this problem to try and get the attack of opportunities working so that when the player moves away from the enemy will strike them. I think I need to better define what exactly that means. Right now we're just saying if the player is moving, the AI should try and attack. And I don't think this is as straightforward as target is moving. I think this needs to be if I would attack the enemy from their current tile, and they're moving to a tile that I would not be able to attack them, which is going to be a much more complicated thing to figure out. But once I know that information, then I should have the AI plan everything it's going to do. In fact, maybe the part of the problem is that we're planning the action. No, I don't know. I'm going to have to give it some thought over my lunch break. So we're going to stop. I'm going to go get some lunch. We will come back in 2 hours and I will keep working on this problem. And as I said at the beginning of the stream, I've got 4 weeks off of work. I'm going to be streaming 4 to 5 days a week. I will be updating the schedule on Twitch is going to be the easiest place to track it, or the Discord. But this is a tentative schedule. And we are going to be working towards trying to get chapter 1 of the game done. If I can solve this movement problem, I think it's going to be a lot of content creation over the next few weeks. But I just want to get this movements thing sorted because it's kind of the last piece of the puzzle for combat, and I think it should be in a good spot to just move forward with after this. I think it'll probably end up being the second 2-hour stream today. We'll still be continuing on this problem, trying to get these attack of opportunities working, and then tomorrow hopefully we can jump into maybe some cutscene work. I've been working on some dialogue stuff off camera, and I have a bunch more cutscenes that we need to create, so that could be fun to do. For now, though, this will be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.